Hey everyone, welcome to What If Wednesday. I am Heather, and I'm really glad that you're here. We have spent the first few weeks of January really exploring our North Star words, finding your anchor point, that touchstone that really helps you come back to when life feels overwhelming. So, hopefully, by now, you're starting to see how your word shows up in different parts of your life. I know that I am. I've shared with you all in the Canopy how it is definitely something that I need to be brought back to. So, but for What If Wednesday, this week's question is, what if you showed up as a whole person at work, the messiness and all? And I want to be really honest with you from the start that this is actually a really complicated question, I think, because for me personally, I don't know how to show up any other way. This is going to be one of those super vulnerable sessions where I kind of talk to you about where I'm coming from. I've shared with you all that my top strengths are woo and positivity. And I naturally connect with people. I share openly. I bring my full self everywhere I go. And that's just really who I am. But I'm also a 45-year-old white woman who grew up in Southwest Ohio in the 80s and 90s. I am speaking from a place of privilege, and I recognize that. I recognize what might feel really natural and safe for me does not feel safe for everyone. Um, so today, it isn't about me telling you what you should do. It's really about exploring what gets in the way of you and why. So sit with that question for a minute. What if you showed up as a whole person at work, messiness and all? Because here's what I know to be true. Your personal life and your professional life are completely intermingled, and they always have been. When your kid gets sick, it affects how you show up. When you're navigating a family transition, it's there in the back of your mind during those meetings. When you're dealing with anxiety or grief or uncertainty, what's next? It doesn't magically disappear the moment you log onto your work computer. And yet, so many of us have been conditioned to believe that we need to keep these two things separate, show up in a very polished way. Y'all know that I don't do that. Have it all together. Leave that personal stuff at the door when you go to work. But here is really what I'm genuinely curious about. And I mean this as a real question, not just a rhetorical one, but why? Why do we think that we can't show up as our whole selves at work? What is it that people are actually afraid of? And again, this is a genuine question that I want y'all to sit with, because this is not like that surface level stuff of it seems unprofessional or what is underneath all that fear. Because I think the answers are going to be different for different people. We're all women in this community, but some of those differences I think are really rooted in real cultural dynamics, power structures, the consequences that not everyone faces equally. And again, full transparency and honesty, I did not even think about those types of things until really probably the last decade or so. And it really is because of a move that our family made from Ohio to Corpus Christi that forced me to really think about m- where my where my place was in the world and when it was completely rocked by a big cultural difference for me. So here's what I want you to think about. Our first reflection here is about the fear associated with that. And so I want you to think about the last time that you chose not to share something about your personal life at work. So maybe hard day, something happening with your family, maybe it's just you're tired and overwhelmed. What stopped you from mentioning that? And I'm going to pause for a little bit because this is where you really need to think because this is in the uncomfortable spaces, right? Like it's super uncomfortable to think about this stuff. And so after thinking about that, now I want you to dig just a little bit deeper and say, what were you actually afraid might happen? Were you afraid of being judged? Maybe it was seen as less capable. You have to show up as this perfect human every day. Or is it because you're not being taken seriously? Were you, women, of course, and P.S., I am this person. Were you afraid of becoming the emotional one? I promise it's not possible that you're more emotional than me. So, or the person that you're talking with can't handle it. Maybe just were you afraid of being penalized, passed over for opportunities, seen as not committed enough? Just sit with that for a minute. Both for those of you sitting with me live and those listening to this recording, because I know that a lot of you listen to the recording. Just sit in that. What were you afraid might happen? And those fears aren't unfounded. For some people in some workplaces, showing vulnerability absolutely comes with consequences, especially if you're a woman, maybe you're a person of color, especially if you're navigating some kind of bias or stereotype, or you have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as competent. There are so many different workplaces. And so when I say show up as your whole self, I don't want to be blind to the fact that I have to acknowledge it is so much easier for me to say that than it might be for y'all to do. And that is worth sitting with. With that, again, I told y'all that this was going to be this vulnerable time that we're really talking about some stickiness here, but man, I want you to be able to break out of that somehow because when we don't share any of ourselves, it's you show up like a professional robot with no personal context. You miss out on something that's really important, and that's connection and understanding. You're missing that chance to actually support each other through the hard stuff. And so, because I've been thinking so much about this lately, um, I think about what we lose when we pretend that we're not whole people. I'm in this weird midlife phase where again, I shared with y'all that my word is clear and I'm clear who I am. I'm clear what my talents are, what my strengths are, what I want to do with my business, all of those pieces. And for me, even with all my woo and positivity, even though I naturally share, it still is hard to be vulnerable sometimes. It still feels risky that I don't have it figured out today, or it's really hard, or that I'm needing some help. Man, that's really hard for me in this business space and moving into a different world from having an entire team around to just be able to go to someone. But when I do share that stuff and when I am leaning on others in a space and I've made some connections with other coaches, when we're navigating all that stuff, people relax and then they open up and say, "Oh, okay, good." Because you made me think that you had it all together in all of those spaces, or they stop trying to perform in that perfection. I'm going to share a specific example. I had a coaching session last week with someone that I've known for a little while. And we used to work on the same team and talking about something, and I don't want to share too much detail just so this person doesn't feel uncomfortable, but they used to say, "Man, it sounded like I used to think you had it all together, that it looked like from the outside that, man, you were just coasting right through." Absolutely not. Just making shit up as I go along. And sometimes it feels really confident. And I'm finally to that stage where, hey, I'm going to say these things and this is what I believe. So that confidence is there. But it's taken a lot of time to get there. So the next thing that I want you to be thinking about is what might become possible at your work if people knew what you were actually dealing with. Not every detail. You don't have to share your entire life. Heather does that, and that's stupid, and that's not the right call either. But just some context, some of the human stuff. Talking about you got a new dog. You went out of town for the weekend. Something small. Maybe if they knew all of these things were going on, maybe you've got you're taking care of a aging parent or you're taking care of a sick kid or something, maybe somebody would offer to cover a meeting if they knew that there was someone sick or that you needed to be at a doctor's appointment. Maybe your manager would adjust that deadline if they knew that something felt really heavy. And so I just want you to think about how your colleagues can help you with that scenario. And then they also, that gives them permission to say, oh, I've been there. I know that. And so the cool place would be, what kind of community could you build if people understood what everyone was bringing to work? I'm not saying this is going to save the world, friends. Please don't think that. That's where my positivity goes overboard a little bit. But it, you're not sharing everything. You don't have to share every little piece of your life. You only need to share what you feel comfortable with. But I do promise you, and I saw this when I was a teacher, and teaching with students in the classroom, the more I shared about myself and me showing up or used personal examples to bring something to life, the more human I was for them to approach when something was going on. And so you do need to have some boundaries, and I get that, but I really think that we're missing out if you're not sharing a little bit. And so this piece is going to feel a little bit more maybe uncomfortable because I want to talk about some cultural context a little bit. And this is where I feel like we really have to acknowledge something, that the advice to be authentic or show vulnerability at work, it often comes from people like me. And I'm going to say people with privilege who face fewer consequences when they share these things. If you're navigating a workplace where you're already feeling like you're other, you may already be having to prove yourself. You may already be dealing with a lot of microaggression or bias. I guarantee that I have experienced that, but this is what drives Scott crazy about me, is that I'm a little bit naive when it comes to even recognizing that it's happening because I just blow right past it. But if you're dealing with that, your calculus is different. Being vulnerable may not be good for you, and it may genuinely put you at risk in ways that you don't want to face. And I don't want to stand here and try to tell you what you should do. What I do want for all of us, especially those of us in this place where we can create this space, is to create a workplace where everyone feels safe to show up as a whole person. That means leaders excuse me, modeling vulnerability. It, I'm having some conversations right now with some folks on LinkedIn and talking about how leaders need to be vulnerable and they're paid for having all the answers, and showing up in this personal way is it is bad for them because they need people go to them for the answers. Yes, but wouldn't it be great to know that like they're actually real people too? Because this also means that we are actively dismantling the systems that are punishing people for being human and rewarding others for the same behavior. So it just notice that I want you to notice who gets to be authentic without the consequences and who doesn't, and doing something about that if you can. Because the goal isn't for just you to show up, the goal is to create an environment where we can all show up. And so, what I hope that you take from this conversation, and then we'll do a little bit of discussion. I'll probably stop the recording so you all can share how you want. But your North Star word, whatever it is, it applies to your whole life, not just parts of you at work, not just parts of you at home, but how you really integrate that and how much you share what feels safe. That's going to be different based on who we are and where we are at work. But the question really isn't, am I doing this right? The question is, what would need to be true for you to feel safe bringing more of yourself to work? What small step could you take, or what culture could you create in your little pocket of the world to move that forward? I know these are hard questions. I know this stuff isn't simple. It's messy and it's complicated, and there's no perfect answers. And so I just appreciate that y'all are willing to even consider some of these questions.